Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? I think computers from the late 90s are really cool, and in some ways they marked a turning point for the industry. This time, let's talk about what it was like to work at a computer store during that era. This episode's going to be a little bit different than most. Usually I pick a single topic and try to go at it from kind of a technical or political or business angle and just dissect the thing and share with you my thoughts on it so that it can spur some thinking on your own. This time it's just going to be me kind of waffling on about some memories that I have, some experience that I've had from almost 20 years ago, which is a little bit scary to think that it's been almost that long. So if you're not really interested in just hearing interesting stories or anything like that, if you want, deep technical information, well, you might want to skip this episode. Otherwise, if you're curious about the way things were for a time period and maybe get a few humorous stories out of it, well, stick with me here. So my first job I got in the summer of 1999. I don't remember what month, but I was what would I have been? I was about to be a junior in high school. I was about to get my first car. I already had my license. And during the summer, my parents basically decided that I needed to get the hell out of the house and that it was time for me to get a real job. And I'm like, all right, fine. Clearly this is something that needs to happen. So in the newspaper, we found a posting for job openings at this new computer store in town. It was brand new. It was like an independent kind of mom and pop type of operation, but they were just opening up and they needed like the first batch of employees, right? So I figure, okay, they're obviously going to be looking for people to work part-time, so I can make that work. Let's see what we can do. So I talked with them. We had an interview. It worked great. I got a job. Now, I wanted to do technical work, right? Because that's really where my mind was at. I had a lot of experience doing hands-on technical work with both Windows and Macs, and I figured that's my strong suit. Well, they had already hired all the technical people that they needed to work in the service department. But they said, you know what, we can feed you some of that repair work periodically if, we're swamped or whatever. But, the majority of the work that you would be doing is going to be sales. And I sat there and scratched my head about that for a while because I consider myself an introvert. Now, being introverted doesn't necessarily always mean that you're shy or that you're not able or willing to talk to people or anything like that. And I think introvertedness is maybe a topic I'll even pick up and run with in another podcast episode. But at that time, I considered myself not only an introvert, but I just didn't really want to walk up to people and talk to them if I didn't know them, right? I guess you could say I was shy. I just wasn't comfortable doing that kind of cold calling, cold sales kind of stuff. And the one thing that they impressed upon me, when I first started working there and even during the job interview is that they wanted to be very service oriented, right? They didn't want to be like a big box store, which ironically enough, around this same time, a Best Buy was opening up just down the street. And it was a big deal in this town that they were finally getting a Best Buy. But, they impressed upon me about how they really wanted to offer the best customer service that they could. And they even said, look, we know Best Buy is opening up down the street. We want to, be the opposite of that. They figure people would go there and it would just be the big box store and yada, yada, yada. They wanted to come to our store and get better, like hands-on help. They want to feel like they're getting their money's worth and that if they have questions, they can come to us and all that kind of stuff. So I had to learn very quickly how to talk to people and, explain to them, how computers worked and what attributes in a computer that they were looking for, would be relevant to their particular situation in non-technical terms. And It was tough. I mean, it was really tough to try and figure that out at first because I just wasn't used to talking to people like that, and I really wasn't used to walking up to people and saying, "Hi, my name is Colin. What can I do to help you? Can I help you find anything?" Stuff like that. And that was a real struggle. But the bigger struggle, which often turned humorous, was kind of like what I was getting at there, was working with people who didn't otherwise have much technical background. So one reason why I think computing in the late 90s, and I can't really put a specific date on when this began. I'd say it was maybe, I don't know, 98, maybe late 97, something like that. But towards the end of the 90s, we're getting all geared up for Y2K and the new millennium, and everyone's losing their minds over that. It seemed like the computing industry took on a major shift in that you didn't have to be a geek or a nerd to really start to get into and use a computer. And what's more, the rate of progress felt like it increased rapidly at that point, right? I mean, we had Windows 98, which was a major iteration off of Windows 95. We had major advances in the Mac OS around that time. We had very big performance gains. I mean, just a few years prior, we were looking at computers that were, maybe breaking 100 megahertz. And in 99, 2000, we had computers that were 500 megahertz, if not faster. So the rate of progress, just incredible. And then the biggest thing was the internet and how it finally started to really become accessible to the average person. Things like DSL and cable. In 99, I know some areas started to have it then. The particular area I lived in, we didn't start to see that pop up until I'd like to say late 2000, maybe early 2001. But even in the late 90s, dial-up was becoming more and more common, and people were using fewer kind of walled garden internet services like AOL or CompuServe or Prodigy or any of those, and just more, signing up for service with an ISP and dialing in and just getting straight on the internet using Netscape Navigator or Internet Explorer or whatever. And so it brought a completely different kind of clientele into the store. And it was a challenge, dealing with people who for the first time wanted to buy a computer. Oftentimes it was because their kids wanted one or needed one, to be able to do their homework, and the parents or whatever, I balance my checkbook on paper and I don't want to use a computer, blah, blah, blah. So they were getting kind of dragged kicking and screaming into this new era of using this technology that they had absolutely no familiarity with. And trying to also kind of counter all of the stereotypes of computer stores and, people who were knowledgeable about computers and all of that. One funny thing was it was impossible to convince people that we didn't work on commission at this store. We didn't. It was a mom and pop kind of one-off store, completely independent. And the owners who were there almost every day, great people, actually, very business savvy, and they were hilarious themselves. But they made it clear to us, we're not doing the commission thing. Don't try to oversell people. If somebody comes in saying that they need a really basic computer, don't try and sell them the top of the line thing. We want to get really good word of mouth, really good reputation and all that going. But it was still a struggle because people, for whatever reason, came in thinking that we were going to operate like a car dealer and that, we only ever made money off of the commission. So we would always try to upsell them on, whatever we possibly could. And so that was challenging to try and get people to trust us, especially when their only other experience may have been at a place like Best Buy, where they just didn't get any customer service at all. Or, if they did, it was somebody who didn't really know what they were talking about, maybe. Not to say that the people at Best Buy don't know what they're talking about. I'm not trying to imply that at all, but at any big box store, a certain percentage of the employees are just there to work and not necessarily, I don't want to say experts in their field, but not necessarily invested in what it is they're selling. You know what I mean? And I think that's still true today. You know, you walk into a store and sometimes you're going to get salespeople who know what it says on the box. And other times you'll get people who actually know the product in and out. Maybe they own one, maybe they use one. But anyway, so it was interesting, I should say, you know, working with folks who would come in and they'd be looking for their first computer or maybe another one or a replacement, that sort of thing, and trying to convince them that, no, we really do understand what it is they're looking for based on the criteria that they told us. And, you know, that we're not trying to oversell them on stuff. I would like to say the average like full system price back then was probably somewhere around $1,500. If you went, you know, tower and keyboard and mouse and monitor. Of course, back then the monitors were all CRTs. So the most common thing was like a 17-inch CRT. Maybe throw a printer in there, kind of a cheap inkjet. You'd get to about $1,500, which is about 3 times as much as you'd pay for a computer these days. So that's another big aspect as to how things have changed. But it, you know, I learned an awful lot, like I said, not just how to deal with people. You know, I got kind of dragged kicking and screaming into learning how to work with people, you know, kind of break that shyness, I guess you could say. But also how to deal with people when they were upset. So here's a great story to start it off. We also sold used computers. It wasn't just new ones. The new ones were all kind of custom build, white box. You know, nothing was, you know, it's not like we had a deal where we could sell Dell or Gateway or Compaq or anything like that. It would have been really hard to do that and be price competitive. So we sold custom machines that we built in-house, and then also resold what they call white box PCs that are manufactured by these independent, you know, larger operations that kind of try to compete with the big name brands, but sell to smaller operations. Anyway, but we also sold used computers. So we'd buy used computers and components from people, clean them up, you know, test everything out, put a warranty on all of it, turn around and resell them. And I can never forget this one time. It's absolutely hilarious now, at least to me, but I was scared out of my mind at the time that it happened because I initially dealt with this guy. So we had a guy come in and he was from kind of out in the country, I think. I think it was one of those scenarios where his kids needed a computer for school and he didn't want to spend hardly any money on it. And he didn't even seem interested in buying a computer. He came in and he wanted to buy the cheapest thing we had, right? I think he even said that specifically. Sell me the cheapest thing you got. Okay, well, we've got some used computers over here. And I showed him, I'd like to say it was probably a Pentium 166, which was definitely a few years old at that point, right? When the, you know, modern mainstream machine was like a P3 500 megahertz. A Pentium 166 with probably 32 mega RAM, maybe 16. It had Windows 95 on it. And yes, we sold all legit copies of Windows with the computers. We didn't put pirated anything on there. He looked at it and I'd like to say that the price tag on there was something like $200 for just the tower, which I think was actually pretty fair, for that, you know, for a machine like that. Considering we had a 1 year, was it a 1 year or 90 day? I don't remember. It was at least a 90-day warranty on all the stuff we sold. And we would repair it in-house. We wouldn't just tell you to go take it to somewhere else. So this guy looks at the price tag and that was too much for him for whatever reason. So he goes, you know, I'll give you $120 for it. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to negotiate on price. You know, the price on the tag is kind of, you know, what it is. Well, let me talk to your boss. All right, fine. So I go and get one of the owners, and I don't want to name names, but it was a husband and wife who were the owners of this store, and they had business experience elsewhere. They owned another store in town, completely unrelated to computers. And And the wife was from Thailand, I believe. And she was just an absolute powerhouse, like in terms of getting deals done, and just she was like the ultimate businesswoman. She really knew what she was doing, and she really knew how to negotiate with people. She was tough. The nickname that we gave her was Knuckles, as in, like Sonic and Knuckles. Because a bunch of us, were in high school, or we were, we're in college or whatever. A lot of the employees were younger, and we were into video games and stuff. So we ended up calling her Knuckles as a nickname. And surprisingly enough, she loved it, but she didn't understand the reference. So she thought that we were talking about like knuckles, like on her hand. And so she took that and ran with it. And, she's sitting here telling about, oh, I'm tough like a knuckle, and it's just, it's like, no, we're talking about the video game thing. But anyway, the nickname fit her perfectly. So I go and get her, hey, can you go talk to this guy? He wants to negotiate on a price. She's like, all right, I'll go talk to him. So she goes out there, and I didn't hear all the details of it, but she ultimately, rang the guy up, brought the computer back to the kind of the counter in the service area, and she told me, okay, we need to show this guy the computer works. And I'm like, okay. So I hook up, a test keyboard and monitor, mouse and all that, turn it on. Yeah, it boots into Windows. It works fine. All the hardware works. CD-ROM drive goes in and out, all that kind of stuff. And okay, you can turn it off. Okay, so I shut it all down. And then she's like, put an extra warranty void sticker on the back. Now, I should clarify, this is one thing I wasn't too thrilled about, especially now, but with this store, we would put warranty void if removed stickers on the back of the machine, so that if you took the cover off the computer, it would leave like residue behind on both parts that said void. So we knew if people had gotten into the machines or not. It was a stipulation of the warranty. Again, I didn't necessarily agree with it. I can understand from a small business perspective why you'd want to do it, because it's entirely possible that people could go start tinkering around inside the computer and screw it up and blame, you. And as a small business, you're operating on pretty thin margins as it is. I can understand why they did it. Anyway, so she had me put an extra warranty void if removed sticker on the back. So there were 2 on this thing. And, she had rung the guy up. She sent him on his way. She explained to me that the deal she made with him was she sold him the machine for $150, basically, dropped $50 off the price, but she sold it to him with no warranty. She said, we'll show it to you working here, but as a condition of giving you a deal on the price, no warranty at all. You take it home, that's it. As is, you bought it. And she even put that on the receipt very clearly. And I think she even had him sign it or something like that to say no warranty. So he takes it home and we think no more of it. The next day, this dude comes back yelling and screaming. He brings his computer with him. Oh, you stole me a piece of shit. Thing doesn't work. You put a timer in it so it wouldn't work. It would only work on the bench. You rigged it. You rigged it so it only work here in your store. And now when I take it home, I want my money back. And he's freaking out. And we're like, whoa, what the hell? We told you, no warranty on the thing. You signed off. We showed you working on the bench. And he kept coming up with stories about how we must have rigged it somehow so that it would work for us, but not for him. We tinkered with it when, his back was turned for a moment or something like that, which totally wasn't true. But the owners were there. And thankfully the other owner was there that day. He was kind of a bigger guy. And, well, not that big, but he was anyway. So the other guy was there. The other owner was there, and I kind of pulled him aside and kind of filled him in on what the deal was, and I'm sure his wife had told him the night before, and he's like, yeah, okay, I'll work with the guy. So he tries to smooth things over to cool the guy down or whatever, because this guy is like freaking out. It looks like he wants to deck somebody, and he's like, all right, well, tell you what, we'll take a look at it for you real quick. We're not going to, again, this isn't warranty repair. We're not going to fix it. But if it's a really quick thing that we can just get up and running for you again, then we'll take care of you. All right. So we put the machine back on the bench. And the first thing is both of the warranty void if removed stickers are gone. Not just haven't been tampered with. They're just straight up gone. This dude peeled them off. like a couple of screws on the cover were missing, and we normally put them all in when we, fix machines up to sell. So a couple of the screws are missing. I take the cover off. All of the ribbon cables inside are like completely disconnected, right? This dude had gone in and just made an absolute mess of this thing. And I don't know why. Like, I don't know if he had if he thought he was trying to make it better or faster, or if he tried to upgrade it or what. He acted like he had absolutely no experience with computers at all. But anyway, so, we look at this thing and it's like, I don't even know where to begin with this. Yeah, I could try to put the cables back where they go, but what else is going to be wrong with it? You know what I mean? Like, he could have swapped some of the RAM out. He could have goofed with the CPU. He could have fried the thing, whatever. So I show the owner, like, man, this guy made a mess of this thing. And I even had another tech look at it. And he's like, yeah, I don't want to touch that. So the owner tells us to button it all up, and he goes and tells this dude basically, take your computer, get lost, and the guy puts up a big fuss and even stands out front of the building for like 15 minutes in the parking lot, like yelling at everybody who's coming anywhere near the store. Don't go in there. They're a bunch of crooks and da-da-da, take your money and all this crap. And like, he was very loud and very aggressive, where we were scared. Like, we were afraid that he was going to either start a fight or pull a gun or whatever. And, after he left, we all just kind of like needed a moment to decompress. You know what I mean? Like, the people who weren't involved in that, like, they took care of up front with the other customers, and all of us stood like out back, and a couple other people smoked, and I just stood there and just kind of like, for a while. We can laugh about it now because I don't even know what that guy was trying to pull, but this was the kind of crap that we dealt with. Speaking of crap that we dealt with, so a little more context here. And this is probably a good lesson for some of you who are maybe about to get your first job, or learning about, how to develop a good work ethic and all that. So, the computer store was brand new when I first started. I actually got hired even before the store opened, so I helped set it up. And they had already hired another technician. What I really wanted to be was the Mac tech, the full-time, well, not full-time, but the primary service tech who worked on Macs, because that's what most of my experience was in. And I figured the workload would equal out to about how many hours a week I could put in. But they had already hired another guy for that. So that's when they did the whole, well, we can give you some work, but you're mostly going to be doing sales kind of bit. I remember that it was like a week before opening, and he and I were both working. He was a nice guy and everything, but the owners asked him, hey, can you go back in the service area and like sweep up back there? Or can you go organize these shelves or something like that? It wasn't technical work. It was a menial task, but you know what? When you're at work, that's what you do, right? You do what your bosses tell you to do. And they're like, hey, Colin, I need you to go out front and do this other menial task. He looks at him and goes, nah, I don't feel like doing that. And I'm just sitting here kind of going, I don't think that's the right answer. And the owners looked at him and go, no, I need you to go like organize those shelves. And he goes, nah, I don't want to do that. They fired him on the spot. They're like, oh, okay, well, see ya. Oh, hey, Colin, by the way, now you're the full-time Mac tech. Now, I still didn't get enough service work coming in to do that, to have it be all of my hours. I'd like to say that I put in probably 25 hours a week on average, especially when the school year was up and running, because I was in high school at the time. But to circle back, ultimately I became, the Mac tech. And I think our store kind of made a good name for ourselves in terms of service. I had a couple of really good coworkers who did PC work too. And we'd get computers in that maybe weren't treated quite so well. We learned as we went to like implement new policies, as necessary. One of the policies was you always open up machines that come in for service outside. Right. There was a back door to the place that went out to kind of a service area, like a service drive, a little parking lot, whatever. Customers usually wouldn't park there. But we eventually developed the policy of you always open up computers that are brought in for service outside first. And you clean them out, you hit them with like the air compressor, get all the dust and everything out of them before you open them up inside the store. The reason why we developed that policy was two separate incidents. The first one we didn't think was such a big deal. It was like a one-off. The second time was when we really implemented the policy. That first time, this store was brand new, like I said, and not just the store itself, but the building. It was in a strip mall that had just been built, right? So we were one of the first tenants in one of the units in this building. Brand new, fresh paint, all the everything. We get one of the first service machines in to fix. We put it up on the bench in the back, and it's kind of secluded from the customers, thankfully. But we put it up on the bench in the back, and we take the side panel off, and like 1,000 billion tiny little cockroaches come flying out of this thing, just crawling everywhere, and just disappear. Like, they all came out like they were, oh, we're so glad to be out of there. And then they just disappeared. They like went in the walls or I don't know where. But every once in a while, from then on, we'd occasionally see a cockroach. And it was like a reminder of, okay, yeah, that was really stupid to open that computer in the store. The other one happened probably a couple months later and this was when we really cemented you only open computers outside at first. Even if it's the dead of winter, who cares? You always take the side panel off outside first. We had another one. We set it up on the tech bench. We pull the side panel off, and literally a pile of rat crap came falling out of it. Like the thing had literally become a rat's nest. You hear that expression when you see a big pile of wiring and stuff. I use that all the time, disorganized wiring. No, this one was like literally a rat's nest. It was full. The entire computer was packed full of like shredded up paper towels or something like that, and just rat crap. And of course, we pull the side panel off and it all just comes, dumping out onto our bench. And we're just like, why did we do that? So from then on, we just like pick the machine up, we take it outside and we shake it out and like just, try not to barf all over the place. But it was just bad. So yeah, we learned to always open machines outside after that. And the owners thankfully bought us a big air compressor that we can use, especially after we told them the cockroach story. But we'd have the occasional customer come in and yell and scream and throw a fit. But in some ways, I think that was a good thing, right? Because it meant that computers were becoming accessible like that. It wasn't just a bunch of people who knew exactly what they wanted. And, they came in to buy, I want that one part, I need that one component, I need this, whatever. People just coming in going, yeah, my kid needs we think we need a computer for my kid who's in middle school or in high school. And, this is the kind of stuff we need to do. Help us find something. And putting something together for them, was really nice to be able to not just, sell to other nerds. It was an exciting time in the industry. The whole buy, sell, use stuff was, of course, interesting on its own. Like I've got that story about, selling a used computer to that one guy, and buying used equipment sometimes was entertaining as well. We had a guy come in with an inkjet printer, and we bought inkjet printers back then because they weren't exactly disposable. They were getting to that point, but they weren't exactly disposable, kind of like they are now. An inkjet printer would probably run you, I don't know, $100 brand new, as opposed to now when they're like $20 or something like that. They're stupid cheap. But we'd have people, they'd want to upgrade to a new printer. They'd want to upgrade to a laser printer, whatever. So they'd bring in their inkjet printer, and we would, appraise it based on what we thought it would sell for used. And then we would generally offer about half that price, that used sales price, to the customer. Our margins were all over the place. On new stuff, we didn't really have very good margins. We were lucky to get 30% on new stuff. But used stuff could often be better, and we kind of needed the used stuff to offset the new stuff. but we'd offer about half of what we could sell it for. So, we always told them, well, you're making half and we're making half, and that sounds fair, and they, oh, okay, fine. So like on a printer that would go for $100 new, we figured we could probably sell it for maybe $70 used, something like that. And we would also take into account the condition of the ink cartridges in the printer. Because when you'd buy a brand new printer, they would come with ink cartridges in the box. And back then, the average ink cartridge was probably $20, something like that. So you'd have one color and one black. So for a printer that we would sell for, $75, we had to make sure that people were at least getting a decent amount of ink in it. Like, we didn't want to sell a printer that close to new retail with no ink, because people would obviously do the math and go, well, it's a better deal for me to buy the new one. So we'd make sure that the ink tanks were at least half full when we would sell these inkjet printers. We had a guy come in, and he was another, didn't know anything. I don't want to use the phrase country bumpkin, but he kind of was. And I should say that this was a city in an otherwise kind of rural area. It was a moderate-sized city surrounded by a rural area. Again, not to try to stereotype or anything like that, but just to give you context as to where this guy came from. So it's not like he's in the middle of the city and he's driving a clapped-out pickup truck. Anyway, so this guy comes in. He's got this inkjet printer. The printer itself, it's okay. It's dirty. It needs to get cleaned up. How much should I get for this? Well, let's take a look at it. We test everything out. And how long is that going to take? Well, normally, it takes a couple hours because we've got other work to do, but we can try. I need the money now. All right. Well, let's do a quick test. Okay, fine. So, set it up on the bench. We hook up to a computer, turn the printer on, printer turns on fine. We print it out. Paper comes through, but nothing printed on it. Okay, well, sir, it looks like your inkjet, your ink cartridges are dead. We need to figure out how to appropriately price this, and we come up to a price, because we figure, all right, we're going to have to stick some ink cartridges in here. Sometimes we would have, half empty cartridges sitting around for models. Other times we had to, put brand new cartridges in there. We did stock cartridges in the store. I think in this case, we had some used, some half empty cartridges we could throw in there. Ultimately, I think the deal we could give him was something like, we could offer him $25, I think, was what we were able to give him. And he balks at that for $25, brand new one goes for $100. Why can't you give me $80 or something like that? Thinking we would just give him, almost all the money for a new one. And we had to explain to him, well, no, we're a store and we try to sell stuff. And, well, what about the ink? Well, tell me about, why are you taking money off? Because I don't have ink. Well, because, people need to, have ink in their printers for them to work and all that. And the line that really got me, that was funny, that I couldn't laugh at, was he justified why the printer had no ink. It was something like, oh, my daughter printing out all the Marilyn Manson pictures or something like that. It's like, the guy probably didn't even know who Marilyn Manson was. But just to use that as an excuse as to why the printer came in with no ink, in his pitch, I guess, for us to give him more money or something like that, just kind of struck me as odd and amusing. I'm sure it's not funny at all now, but to me at the time it was. He didn't strike me as being desperate for the money. It sounded like he was just ornery and wanted to be difficult for the sake of being difficult. But, that was just kind of the crap that you dealt with. It was overall, I would say, a fun experience seeing that rapid progression in technology of stuff coming in. And because we worked with used gear, it really drove the point home as to just how fast things were evolving and expanding. You know what I mean? Like, we'd have computers come in that could barely run Windows 95 and play solitaire. And at the same time, we had modern machines that were really only a few years newer, like Pentium 3 500 megahertz boxes with 128 mega RAM. And what was the video card at the time? It was the Rage 128, ATI Rage 128, something like that. Like, if you got a 16 meg video card like that, that was killer, right? we'd have these machines, on the floor, and we'd load like the Quake 3 Arena demo on them, and we'd be playing Quake 3 Arena on a machine sitting right next to a machine that was really only a few years older that could barely run solitaire, and barely do that animation at the end when you won of the falling cards with a decent frame rate. It was just mind-blowing dealing with all that stuff at the time. And I guess to wrap it up, here's one more story. I've got quite a few more, and maybe I'll tell them to you sometime. Sorry if none of these are funny, but they're amusing to me, at least, maybe because I lived through them. But the rapid pace of technology. So Intel, of course, was a big name back then. AMD was still a big name too. And I'd like to say this was an era when AMD and Intel really went more head to head. They were a lot more even in terms of what they had to offer. Kind of like what they're getting back to today, which I'm really happy to see, by the way. But AMD's big competitor to the Pentium 3 was the K6 series, specifically the K6-2. And in some ways, AMD kind of one-upped Intel in that they started to get the clock speeds to go a little bit faster. So we had some machines that were pretty fast. They were K6-2 550, so 550 megahertz. These machines were actually really quite speedy. The problem, though, is they ran hot. And even though we put, decent case fans and decent heat sinks and all that in all these machines, these were obviously brand new machines at the time, they still tended to run hot. Well, we sold one of those systems to, a nice customer one day. The whole shebang, monitor and printer and all the everything. So it was a full deal. And when we sold a full computer system, that was actually a big deal for us. We didn't sell full computer systems like multiple times a day. On a weekend, we'd sell maybe 2 full systems if we were lucky. And that was a big deal for us. But we sold that K6-2 550 system to a family. They took it home. They came back about a week later going, this thing randomly turns off on us. And we're like, well, that's not right. You bought a brand new thing. That should work. Let's get it fixed for you. So brought it, got it checked in for warranty service. We took a look at it, ran stress tests and everything on it, checked it all out. It all works fine. It all passed fine. It never did it for us. So we called them up going, we've had your computer here running, full bore for like 24 hours. The thing works great. Maybe it was a weird power glitch or something at your house. We're not sure, but, come on in, pick it up, and we'll show you. It works fine. Okay. So they came in, picked it up, took it home. A week later, they bring it back. Same problem. The machine would just randomly shut off on them. And we're scratching our heads, We can't find anything wrong. We pull some of the parts out, put them in different systems to test them there. They all test out good. We tell them, again, we're sorry, but we can't find anything wrong. So they take it home. Third week, they bring it back. And they're starting to get a little upset, understandably. The computer, they're like, we could be in the middle of doing something and the computer will just turn off. And we started thinking, like, what could it be? It's got to be something like an idea or a problem like outside the box. It can't just be a component that's failing. What's going on here? And we got to thinking, all right, so it's like the middle of summer, so it can't be like static electricity. There's going to be, humidity in the air, that kind of stuff. This is Minnesota, so we get decent humidity during the summer. But then we started thinking, okay, it's not humidity, but it is the summer. And these machines kind of run warm. Every time we tested it ourselves was, in our store, which had air conditioning. So one of us had the presence of mind to call the customer and ask, so we're looking at your computer again here, just out of curiosity. This may seem weird, but do you have air conditioning at home? And they said, oh, no. And we're like, where in the house do you keep the computer? And they're like, oh, up on the second floor. And now, like, the light bulbs are going off in our heads. And we're like, okay, we think we know what's going on. Come on in. Let's talk about it. So, so we get the owner involved of the store and everything, the owners, and we basically lay it out to these people like, you can't own this computer. You don't have air conditioning at home. This particular CPU runs so hot, you just can't own it. The thing was thermally shutting itself down because it was the middle of summer. They didn't have air conditioning at home, and those K6-2s, I don't remember what what their average temperature was, but it was obviously so much that wherever they had it in the house, like on the second floor, plus the summer heat, was enough to get the thing to just trip its own internal thermal sensors and just power itself off, is like a safety measure. And we're just like, yeah, you just can't, you can't own this computer unless you buy air conditioning in your house. And what we ended up doing, I think, was doing like a no cost kind of a trade for, I think it was either a Celeron or an Intel or like a P3 kind of base system. It was an even trade really between the two. They didn't get anything lesser than what they paid for. And ultimately the machine never came back. They were very happy with us after that. But I just, that was one thing that I found really interesting. And it is something that I always kind of keep in mind when I troubleshoot things today. Always look for the kind of, outside the box type of, possibilities or solutions whenever you're faced with a really weird problem, right? Sometimes it's not always the most obvious thing. Sometimes it's something obvious, but you aren't geared in your mind to think of it that way, right? Like if you think of it from a temperature perspective with that person's computer, that's totally obvious. Well, yeah, those computers ran hot and they had it in a house that was 100 degrees inside. Of course the thing is going to get pissed off. But if you're looking at it, expecting it to be a component level failure or whatever, that would totally escape you. The computer was totally fine. It was doing what it was set out to do, but the environment that it was in just wasn't good enough. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed my my waffle here for, almost 45 minutes or whatever now. I don't know if you enjoy this or not. If you want to hear more stories, let me know, I guess. I've got tons of them. I've been working in IT for, almost 20 years now, which is scary. Just scary to think I've been working with computers that long. So yeah, my first job working with computers, and I still work full-time with computers today. So yeah, I've definitely got some stories, some of them hilarious and some of them funny only to me, like I suspect today's stories were. But if you enjoyed it, let me know. Give me suggestions for future podcast topics, of course. I am also curious as to what you think. Are there any particular computers from the late 90s, that maybe you've got a soft spot for? Did you grow up during that era, kind of like I did? What computer did you have at home at the time? Did you like it? Any memories or any other information that you want to share, just be sure to shout those out down in the comments below. So if you like the episode, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at thisdoesnotcomp. And as always, thanks for watching.